The numbers are staggering, the debate is intensifying, and the future of an entire nation hangs in the balance. Tonight, we're diving into the most controversial question facing Australia in decades. Can this sunburned continent with a population smaller than Tokyo truly sustain the migration numbers flooding through its borders? This is Aussie Global Affairs, and what you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about immigration, economics, and the very soul of the Australian dream. Imagine standing at Sydney Harbour, watching container ships unload goods from across the globe, while planes descend every few minutes into Kingsford Smith Airport. Each flight carries dreams, ambitions, families seeking better lives. But beneath this picture of prosperity and opportunity, cracks are beginning to show. Housing prices have skyrocketed beyond the reach of ordinary Australians. Emergency rooms overflow with patients waiting hours for basic care. Roads choke with traffic during what used to be off-peak hours. Infrastructure groans under pressure it was never designed to bear. And at the center of this perfect storm stands one question that politicians whisper about in private but rarely address in public. Are we bringing in too many people, too fast, without the capacity to support them? This isn't just an Australian question anymore. This is a global conversation about the limits of growth, the meaning of sustainability, and whether developed nations can continue absorbing migrants at unprecedented rates without fundamentally transforming their societies in ways that citizens never voted for and may not want. What happens in Australia over the next few years will serve as a test case for countries around the world grappling with similar pressures. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the consequences of getting this wrong couldn't be more severe. Let's start with the raw numbers, because they tell a story that few Australians fully comprehend. Australia's net overseas migration hit record levels in recent years, with hundreds of thousands of people arriving annually. To put this in perspective, imagine adding a city the size of Canberra to Australia's population every single year. Now imagine doing that without building a new Canberra's worth of housing, hospitals, schools, roads, and public transport. That's essentially what Australia has been attempting, and the results are exactly what you'd expect: a nation straining at the seams. The Australian government argues these numbers are necessary, even vital. They point to an aging population that needs younger workers to support pension systems. They highlight skill shortages across industries, from healthcare to construction, from technology to agriculture. They emphasize that migrants contribute more in taxes than they consume in services, that they start businesses at higher rates than native-born Australians, that they bring diversity and dynamism to a nation built on immigration. All of these points contain truth, but they also obscure a more complicated reality that deserves honest examination. Housing has become the most visible crisis, the one ordinary Australians feel in their bank accounts and their daily struggles. The median house price in Sydney exceeds $1 million. In Melbourne, it's not much better. Even in regional centres once considered affordable, prices have surged beyond the reach of young families and first-time buyers. Rental vacancy rates in major cities hover near historic lows, meaning thousands of people compete for every available property. Rents have increased so dramatically that people in full-time employment find themselves unable to afford basic accommodation in the cities where they work. Now, migration isn't the only factor driving this housing crisis. Decades of underinvestment in public housing, restrictive zoning laws, NIMBY opposition to development, and tax policies that favor investors over owner-occupiers all play roles. But pretending that adding hundreds of thousands of people annually to a market already in crisis has no impact is intellectual dishonesty of the highest order. Supply and demand still matter. When you dramatically increase demand without proportionally increasing supply, prices rise. It's economics 101, yet politicians act shocked when Australians struggling to find housing direct their frustration at immigration levels. The infrastructure story is equally troubling. Australia's major cities were planned for populations far smaller than they currently host. Roads designed for millions now serve populations approaching that of major global cities, but without the public transport networks those cities built over generations. The result is gridlock, with Australians spending hours each day commuting. time stolen from family, from rest, from life itself. Public transport systems operate at or beyond capacity during peak hours. Trains are packed to dangerous levels. Buses run late because roads can't handle the traffic. And investment in new infrastructure, while substantial, consistently lags behind population growth. Healthcare systems tell a similar story of strain and struggle. Emergency departments in major hospitals regularly go on bypass, unable to accept new patients. Wait times for elective surgery stretch into months or years. Finding a bulk billing GP has become nearly impossible in many areas. Specialists book months in advance. Mental health services, already inadequate, face overwhelming demand. Again, migration isn't the sole cause of these problems. An aging population, chronic underfunding, and systemic inefficiencies all contribute. But adding hundreds of thousands of people annually to a system already in crisis accelerates the decline, making bad situations worse. Education systems face similar pressures. Schools in high-growth areas operate in portable classrooms. Teacher shortages worsen each year. University places are increasingly competitive. The infrastructure of education, from buildings to staff, struggles to keep pace with demand. And these aren't abstract problems. They're real children receiving inferior education, real students missing opportunities, real families watching their kids' futures compromised by systems stretched beyond breaking points. But here's where the debate gets truly complex, and where honest analysis requires moving beyond simple narratives, because Australia genuinely faces demographic challenges that migration helps address. The birth rate has fallen below replacement level. The population is aging rapidly. Without migration, Australia's workforce would shrink, pension systems would become unsustainable, and economic growth would stall. These aren't scare tactics, they're mathematical realities facing every developed nation with below-replacement fertility. Australia also faces genuine skill shortages across critical sectors. Rural and regional areas desperately need doctors, nurses, and allied health professionals. Construction projects stall for lack of skilled tradespeople. Technology companies struggle to find qualified workers. Agriculture depends on seasonal labor that Australians simply won't do. These shortages aren't imaginary, and they have real economic consequences. Businesses that can't find workers either pay premium wages that drive inflation or move operations overseas. Either outcome harms Australian prosperity. Moreover, migrants do contribute economically. They work, pay taxes, start businesses, create jobs. Studies consistently show that migration generates net economic benefits for Australia. Migrants are overrepresented among business owners and entrepreneurs. They bring skills, connections, and perspectives that enhance Australia's global competitiveness. They strengthen ties to growing Asian markets critical for Australia's economic future. These contributions are real and significant. The question isn't whether migration benefits Australia. It clearly does. The question is whether current levels are sustainable given infrastructure, housing, and service capacity. It's a question of pace and planning, not principle. And it's a question that requires honest answers, not political talking points designed to avoid difficult truths. Consider the environmental dimension, rarely discussed but critically important. Australia is the world's driest inhabited continent. Water security challenges intensify as populations grow. Climate change threatens to make these challenges worse. Energy demand increases with population, straining grids already struggling with the transition to renewables. The environmental footprint of additional millions of people living in Australian cities, often in car-dependent suburbs, is substantial. Can Australia sustain current migration levels while also meeting climate commitments? It's a question environmentalists reluctant to address migration often avoid. There's also the social cohesion question, difficult to discuss without accusations of xenophobia but too important to ignore. Rapid demographic change can strain social fabric, particularly when concentrated in specific areas. Communities that experience dramatic transformation over short periods can struggle with integration challenges. This doesn't mean migration is bad or that diversity isn't valuable. It means pace matters, that successful integration requires time and resources, and that ignoring social dynamics in pursuit of economic goals risks backlash that harms migrants most of all. We're already seeing this backlash emerge. Political movements focusing on migration restriction are gaining traction. Resentment builds in communities feeling left behind by rapid change. Division increases between those who benefit from migration and those who bear its costs. This isn't inevitable, but it's predictable when governments prioritize economic metrics over social sustainability, when they dismiss legitimate concerns as racism rather than addressing underlying issues. So what's the solution? Because simply saying stop migration isn't realistic or desirable, but continuing current trajectories without addressing capacity constraints isn't sustainable either. The answer lies in honest assessment of what Australia can actually absorb, matched with massive investment in infrastructure, housing, and services needed to support population growth. This means building housing at unprecedented scale, not just luxury apartments, but affordable homes where families can actually live. It means investing billions in public transport, in roads, in the connective infrastructure that makes cities livable. It means expanding healthcare capacity, training more doctors and nurses, building hospitals and clinics. It means growing education systems to match population growth. It means ensuring water and energy security. These investments are massive, expensive, and urgent. It also means being more strategic about migration itself. Not all migrants contribute equally to addressing Australia's challenges. Student visa programs have been exploited, with some institutions operating essentially as migration pathways rather than educational centers. Temporary visa categories have mushroomed, creating an underclass of workers with limited rights. Family reunion programs, while important, don't address skill shortages. A more focused approach targeting genuine skill gaps while ensuring temporary programs don't undermine wages and conditions for Australian workers would serve everyone better. Regional migration offers another avenue. Australia's major cities strain under population pressure, while regional areas often struggle with population decline. Programs that direct migrants to regional communities, coupled with infrastructure investment making those communities attractive places to live, could address multiple challenges simultaneously. But this requires genuine commitment, not symbolic gestures that see migrants leave regional areas as soon as residency requirements are met. The business community needs to accept responsibility too. For too long, employers have relied on migration as a substitute for training Australian workers or offering wages and conditions that attract locals. The construction industry's dependence on temporary workers, the agricultural sector's reliance on working holidaymakers, the healthcare system's recruitment of overseas nurses rather than training sufficient numbers domestically, all represent failures to invest in Australia's workforce. Migration should complement domestic training, not replace it. We also need honest conversation about what Australia is and wants to be. A country of 25 million people spread across a continent offers different possibilities than a country of 50 or 100 million. Bigger isn't necessarily better. Australia's quality of life, its environmental heritage, its livability, these things have value that pure economic growth metrics don't capture. What's the point of economic growth if ordinary people can't afford housing, if traffic is unbearable, if access to nature disappears, if quality of life declines? This doesn't mean pulling up the drawbridge. It means being thoughtful about pace, about capacity, about ensuring migration serves Australia's long-term interests rather than short-term business preferences or political convenience. It means having the courage to say that current numbers may be too high for current capacity, that slower growth with better integration might serve everyone better than rapid growth that strains systems beyond breaking points. The international context matters too. Australia's migration debate doesn't happen in isolation. Countries worldwide grapple with similar questions. How much migration can societies absorb? What integration challenges emerge from rapid demographic change? How do democracies balance economic benefits against social costs? Australia's experience will inform these global conversations. Getting this right matters not just for Australia, but for the future of migration policy worldwide. For migrants already in Australia or hoping to come, this debate must seem frightening. You came seeking better lives, chasing dreams that Australia promised. You're not responsible for infrastructure deficits or housing shortages decades in the making. You deserve dignity, respect, and fair treatment. But you also deserve honest leadership that ensures the Australia you join is sustainable, livable, and capable of offering the opportunities you seek. Unsustainable migration policies ultimately harm migrants most when backlash emerges or systems collapse. The path forward requires courage from political leaders to speak honestly about challenges rather than hiding behind platitudes. It requires massive infrastructure investment funded by the economic growth migration enables. It requires strategic focus on skill needs rather than arbitrary number targets. It requires regional development, making all of Australia attractive, not just major cities. It requires honest conversation about environmental limits and social capacity. Most of all, it requires recognition that sustainable migration policy serves everyone's interests, while unsustainable policy ultimately serves no one. This is Aussie Global Affairs, and we'll continue investigating the most critical issues facing Australia and bringing you analysis that goes beyond sound bites and political spin. Subscribe to this channel because the migration debate is just beginning, and what happens next will determine Australia's future for generations. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the policies and decisions shaping this nation. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what's really at stake in Australia's migration debate. Leave a comment telling us your perspective, your experiences, your concerns. Whether you're a migrant, a native-born Australian, someone hoping to come here, or simply someone who cares about Australia's future, your voice matters in this conversation. The question isn't whether Australia should have migration, it absolutely should. The question is whether current levels are sustainable given real constraints and real capacity. It's a question that demands honest answers, not political cowardice or ideological rigidity. It's a question whose answer will determine whether Australia remains the lucky country or becomes a cautionary tale of growth without planning, of numbers without capacity, of economics without sustainability. The choice is ours, the time is now, and the consequences will echo through generations. This is Aussie Global Affairs, reminding you that informed citizens build better nations, that honest debate strengthens democracy, and that the future belongs to those brave enough to face difficult questions with open eyes and courageous hearts.